You don't even notice them. These tiny habits, they feel harmless, ordinary, just something you always do, but day by day. They mess with your mind more than you think. Tonight, we look at 30 quiet ways you're f***ing with your own head. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop. Checking your phone the moment you wake up, it always starts the same way. Your alarm goes off, or maybe it doesn't, because you've already woken up 5 minutes before it rings out of pure anxiety. Your eyes are still crusty, your body still half asleep, but your hand has a mission. It reaches out, like muscle memory, like instinct, like you're defusing a bomb, except the bomb is your phone, and instead of cutting wires, you're opening apps. Before your feet even touch the floor, you're already diving into the digital vortex. Notifications, messages, emails, a meme from that one group chat you muted weeks ago but never left, a flash of bad news, a reel of someone's perfect morning smoothie bowl, a text that says, "We need to talk." Your day hasn't started, but your brain, it's already sprinting. You tell yourself it's harmless. You're just checking, just making sure you didn't miss anything overnight. But really, what emergency is hiding in your phone at 6:47 a.m.? What earth-shattering update are you expecting while your blanket's still wrapped around your head? Most of the time, it's nothing urgent. Most of the time, it's just noise. But somehow, this small ritual has become sacred. You wouldn't call it a morning routine, because that sounds too intentional. But it's routine nonetheless. The irony is, you haven't even checked in with yourself. You haven't asked your own body how it feels, or your mind what it needs. The first voice you hear is the voice of someone else, commenting, texting, selling, showing off. And it sets the tone. The day starts not with presence, but with performance. You wake up and immediately become an audience member in someone else's story, before you've even written the first sentence of your own. And maybe you think it doesn't matter. It's just a phone. It's just 5 minutes. But 5 minutes turns into 20. Presence turns into passivity. And before you know it, your own thoughts are background noise to the buzz of everyone else's lives. What would it feel like to start the day on your own terms? To take a moment, to breathe, to feel the sheets, the quiet, the pulse in your chest, to let your mind wake up before the world rushes in. It's not about being perfect. It's about reclaiming the first moment of your day as yours, before the rest of the world gets a chance to take it. Saying you'll scroll TikTok for just 5 minutes. You tell yourself it'll only be 5 minutes. Just a quick scroll before getting out of bed. Just a couple of funny videos to start the day with a laugh. You even promise you won't get sucked in this time. You deserve a bit of harmless entertainment, right? But somehow, 5 minutes stretch like taffy, twisting into 20, then 40, then a full hour you can't quite explain. And the worst part is, you weren't even having that much fun. It's not like you chose to waste an hour. It slipped away in increments of 15 seconds, each video short enough to seem innocent. Each swipe all maybe a what if, a just one more. You never made the conscious decision to stay. You just never made the decision to stop. That's the magic of the algorithm. It doesn't need your commitment. It just needs your thumb. By the time you look up, the light in the room has changed. The day has started without you. Your coffee's cold. Your mind feels foggy. And that thing you were supposed to do, you can still do it. Sure. But now you're rushing, irritated, vaguely guilty. You're annoyed at yourself for falling into the trap again. But you also don't know what else would have felt better. Because, let's be honest, starting the day can be hard. Sometimes you're anxious or tired or just don't feel ready. TikTok doesn't judge that. It distracts from it. It says, don't think, just watch. There's a strange comfort in being overstimulated. It keeps you from noticing your own discomfort. And while your brain scrolls, your feelings wait in the corner like guests you're not ready to face. You give them snacks and tell them to wait. You'll deal with them later. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe never. But the problem is, you didn't just delay your day. You outsourced it. You let something else decide how your morning starts. And maybe that's why you feel off, even after an hour of relaxing. Maybe that's why. Deep down, it doesn't feel like rest. Because rest reconnects you to yourself. Doom scrolling disconnects you while pretending to help. It's okay to want ease. It's okay to need escape. But if your first hour awake belongs to an app, what part of the day still belongs to you? Replaying conversations in your head. It always starts with a sentence. Something you said yesterday, or last week, or 5 years ago. A word that came out too fast. A joke that didn't land. A look someone gave you that you still don't know how to interpret. Your brain picks it up like a loose thread and tugs. Just a little. Just enough to unravel your piece. You replay the moment, again and again, like you're editing a film that no one else will ever see. You change the words, your tone, the expression on your face. You imagine better responses, smarter comebacks, more graceful exits. But the original still loops underneath it all, raw and unchangeable. You're both the actor and the critic, stuck in a private screening of your own awkwardness. Sometimes it's not even that serious, just something mildly cringy. But your brain loves to hoard these things. It keeps a whole archive of unflattering clips, ready to play at 2 a.m., or whenever you're trying to fall asleep. And every time it plays, you flinch a little. Your stomach tightens. You feel the heat rise in your face, even if nobody else remembers what you said, even if it didn't matter then, even if it still doesn't. But the loop isn't really about the moment itself. It's about control. You're trying to rewrite something you couldn't control. You're punishing yourself for being human, for being imperfect, for being seen. Because if you can obsess over that one sentence, maybe you can avoid saying the next one wrong. Maybe you can become uncringeable, untouchable, safe. Except that's not how it works. You can't edit real life in hindsight. You can't perfect yourself into never being uncomfortable again. And chasing that kind of control doesn't lead to peace. It leads to paralysis. You become so afraid of saying the wrong thing that you stop saying anything at all. What if you could let it go? Not because it wasn't awkward, not because you were perfect, but because you've earned the right to be unfinished, to be messy, to be someone who says weird things sometimes and still gets to rest at night. You're not the sum of your worst sentences. You're not a blooper reel. You're a person. You get to move on. Comparing yourself to others online. You open your phone for something simple, check the weather, maybe reply to a text, and suddenly, you're on Instagram or TikTok or some other platform you barely meant to open. You scroll, it's casual, mindless. You're not even really looking for anything. And then it happens. That one post. That person who seems to have it all together. The matching outfits. The flawless lighting. The caption that says just a normal day while they're somehow vacationing on a yacht with perfect hair. You keep scrolling. Now you see someone your age who just bought a house. Someone else who just launched their third business. Someone else with abs. Suddenly, your mind is doing math it was never meant to do. You start calculating your worth in likes, your timeline in milestones, your happiness in comparison to someone else's highlight reel, and you didn't even notice when it started. That's the trick of it. Comparison doesn't arrive with a trumpet. It sneaks in quietly, dressed as curiosity. It whispers, just one more scroll. And before you know it, you're not just observing, you're measuring. Their success becomes your failure. Their joy becomes your lack. You tell yourself you're just gathering inspiration, but it doesn't feel inspiring. It feels like you're falling behind in a race you didn't even sign up for. It's not that you're jealous, not exactly. You want to be happy for people, and sometimes you are. But there's this quiet ache that lingers, a feeling that maybe you're not doing enough, that maybe you're already too late. That may be the version of you that should exist, the successful, polished, thriving version. Miss the train. You put your phone down, but the feeling stays. It trails you through your morning, your work day, your evening routine, and you start adjusting yourself in small, invisible ways. You question your choices. You rush your timeline. You hold yourself to standards you never agreed to, all because you saw a curated glimpse into someone else's life and mistook it for truth. But you don't know what's cropped out of their frame. You don't see the mess, the doubt, the behind-the-scenes chaos. Social media doesn't show you the full story. It shows you the trailer, carefully edited, emotionally scored, just long enough to make you wonder why your life doesn't look like a movie. Here's the truth. Your life isn't behind, it's just yours. And it doesn't need to go viral to be valuable. Thinking about what you need to do, but not doing it. You wake up already knowing what you need to do. It's been sitting in your head like a sticky note you can't peel off. Maybe it's an email, a task, a phone call, something you've told yourself you'd handle today. You even think about it while brushing your teeth, while making coffee, while scrolling through your morning distractions. You think about it so much, it almost feels like you've done it, but you haven't. Instead, you do everything around it. You wash a dish, check your inbox, rearrange your desktop icons, open a new tab, close it, open it again. You hover near the task like it's a hot stove, getting close enough to feel the heat, but never touching it. You're not lazy. You're just avoiding the discomfort, the uncertainty, the friction of starting something that might not go well. And as the day goes on, the pressure builds. The task grows heavier, not because it changed, but because you've stared at it too long. You start narrating your failure before it even happens. Why can't I just do this? What's wrong with me? The guilt kicks in, and suddenly you're not just avoiding the task, you're punishing yourself for avoiding it. A perfect loop of dread. The truth is, thinking about doing something isn't the same as doing it. But your brain loves to blur that line. It feeds on the illusion of progress. It gives you just enough dopamine for opening the Notes app, for rewriting the title of your to-do list, for telling a friend, I really need to get this done. It tricks you into feeling productive, while nothing actually moves. What makes it worse is that you blame yourself, like it's a moral failure. You label it as laziness when really, it's avoidance born from fear. Fear of imperfection, fear of judgment, fear that even if you try, it won't be enough. So, instead, you sit with the weight of what isn't done and call it discipline. But maybe the kindest thing you can do for yourself is not to finish everything all at once, but to start poorly, clumsily, imperfectly, to break the loop, not by pushing harder, but by taking one quiet action that says, I don't have to do it all, I just have to begin. Replaying voice notes or photos from someone you've already let go. There's a moment, late at night or in the middle of a quiet afternoon, when you reach for it. That old voice note, that one photo, the screenshot you never deleted. Maybe it's someone you used to love. Maybe it's someone who hurt you. Maybe both. You press play. You stare too long. You let it loop. Not because it brings joy, but because it brings something. It's not nostalgia. Exactly. It's not about missing the person. It's about missing who you were when you were with them. The version of you that laughed in that audio clip. The way your eyes looked a little brighter in that photo. For a second, it almost feels like time travel, like slipping back into a moment where things still made sense. But the problem is, you're not that version anymore, and they're not here, or not the same, or not meant to be. You tell yourself it's harmless, just one listen, just one look. But your brain doesn't do casual when it comes to memory. It digs in, it rewrites, it romanticizes. It adds background music and soft filters until even the worst moments feel like they deserve a sequel. Until even the pain feels better than the silence you're sitting in now. And maybe you don't even want them back. Maybe you know it wasn't right, but you keep returning, like checking a door you already locked. Just to be sure, just to confirm that it's still over, just to remind yourself that it once was real. It's like touching a bruise. Still there, still tender, still yours. What you're really doing is holding on to proof that you once felt something, that you once were chosen, that you once mattered to someone who made your heart race, even if it ended badly, even if it didn't last. And while that's deeply human, it's also quietly exhausting. Because every time you go back, you stay a little less present in the life that's trying to grow around you. You can love a memory without living in it. You can grieve what's gone without rehearsing its return. Some echoes aren't meant to be replayed. They're meant to fade. And when they do, maybe what's left behind is space. Not emptiness, not loneliness, just room for something new to find you. Telling yourself, I'm fine, instead of actually feeling your feelings. Someone asks how you're doing, and the answer slips out before you even think. I'm fine. You say it automatically, like a reflex, like a script you memorized a long time ago. It doesn't matter if your chest is tight or your head is spinning, or your heart feels like it's dragging itself through mud. You smile, you nod, you deflect. You're fine. Totally fine. Sometimes it's because you don't want to get into it. You're tired. You don't feel like unpacking your emotional baggage in the middle of a coffee shop or a Slack call or a casual "how are you?" That clearly wasn't meant for a real answer. But other times, if you're being honest, it's because you've said "I'm fine" so often. You're not even sure what you actually feel anymore. Maybe you grew up learning that feelings were inconvenient, that sadness makes people uncomfortable, that anger makes you difficult, that vulnerability is weakness. So, you became excellent at managing other people's comfort, even at the cost of your own truth. You got good at being okay, even when you weren't. You start to live in a kind of emotional gray zone, not happy, but not in crisis. Not joyful, but not broken. Just functional. You go to work, you reply to texts, you meet deadlines. But inside, There's a quiet weight pressing on your chest, and you carry it like it's just part of being an adult. You assume everyone else must feel the same, and they're just better at hiding it. What's tricky is that "I'm fine" can become a shield so convincing that even you start to believe it. You stop checking in with yourself. You ignore the signs, tension headaches, the way your jaw clenches at night, the tears that show up out of nowhere. You downplay your own pain until it becomes invisible. Until the only version of you that exists in public is the one who smiles and says, "I'm fine." But repression isn't resolution. You don't heal by pretending. You don't grow by bypassing the truth. And the truth is, you're allowed to not be fine. You're allowed to say, "Actually, I'm struggling." You're allowed to cry in the middle of the day. You're allowed to not know why you're upset. You're allowed to take up space in a world that constantly asks you to shrink. There's power in honesty. Even quiet honesty, even if it's just to yourself, even if it's whispered into the mirror or scribbled into a notebook. Admitting what you feel doesn't make you dramatic. It makes you real. Because pretending to be okay all the time doesn't make you strong. It just makes you tired. And eventually, something has to give. Better it be the mask than the person wearing it. Escaping into games or Netflix to avoid real emotions. You tell yourself it's just a way to unwind. Just a few episodes. Just one more level. Just something light to distract your mind. And at first, it works. The screen lights up, and for a while, the noise in your head dims down. You forget that text you've been avoiding, that feeling you couldn't name, that thing you didn't want to think about just yet. You laugh at a sitcom joke. You dodge bullets in a game. You scroll through choices on a streaming app like you're making important decisions. And maybe you are, because the real decision, the one you're not quite naming, is that today, you're choosing to escape. You're not lazy. You're not doing nothing. You're just doing something that helps you feel slightly less like a raw nerve. Real life is complicated, unpredictable, messy. But on the screen, things make sense. The story has structure. The goals are clear. The music swells at the right moments. No one asks you how you're really doing. But hours go by. And when the show ends, or the controller dies, or the screen asks, "Are you still watching?" You pause. You look around. And whatever you were avoiding is still there, waiting. Maybe even heavier now. Maybe a little more tangled. Maybe harder to name, because you buried it under 6 episodes and a full snack drawer. This habit doesn't start from a bad place. It starts from a very human one. You want relief. You want something predictable. Something that won't judge you. Something that lets you check out of the chaos in your chest. And to be fair, sometimes that's exactly what you need. But when escape becomes the only coping tool you reach for, it stops being comfort. It becomes avoidance dressed up as leisure. You start to feel foggy, disconnected, like your days blur together in a loop of autopilot and buffering screens. You tell yourself you'll deal with everything tomorrow, but tomorrow keeps resetting, like a game you're afraid to finish. And deep down, a part of you misses your own presence, misses the version of you who could sit with discomfort and still breathe through it, misses feeling alive in a way that doesn't require pixels or plot lines. There's nothing wrong with enjoying shows or games, but you deserve more than to only feel okay when you're looking away. You deserve rest that nourishes, not just distracts. You deserve to come back to yourself. And maybe that starts with asking, what am I trying not to feel right now? Because once you name it, you can face it. And once you face it, you won't need the screen to hold your hand quite so tightly. writing long to-do lists but never getting started. You sit down with the best intentions. Maybe it's a new day, a new week, a new version of you who finally gets things done. You grab a notebook or open an app. You title it "To Do" like it's a contract with your future self. And then you start writing. Clean the kitchen, finish the report, reply to emails, drink more water, call your mom, reorganize the closet, become a better person. Okay, maybe not the last one, at least not out loud, but it's all there, woven between the lines. A list of tasks that somehow feels like a list of who you should be. It feels productive, like action, like a plan, and for a moment. That sense of control is comforting. You're not doing the things yet, but you're preparing to do them, which counts for something, right? You even add little check boxes or color code priorities. Maybe you light a candle. Maybe you tell yourself, this is the system that will finally work. But then time passes, the list grows longer, the page looks overwhelming, and somehow, you're more anxious than before. You stare at it, but don't know where to start. So you don't. You add more items instead. You rewrite the list in better handwriting. You research productivity hacks. You scroll videos of other people planning their lives. You stay busy, mentally, emotionally, even creatively, but nothing actually gets done. It's not that you're lazy. It's that the list becomes a substitute for action, a proxy for effort, a paper trail of your intentions that you hope will mean something, even if they never turn into reality. And deep down, you're not avoiding the work. You're avoiding the feelings that come with it, the fear of failing, the fear of getting stuck, the fear that trying your best might not be enough. So you keep writing. You keep planning. You keep living in the comforting space between idea and execution. Because in that space, nothing's gone wrong yet. You can still be the person who will do all the things. You haven't disappointed yourself. Not yet. But the truth is, the list won't save you. It's not a magic spell. It's a tool. And it only works when you move from writing to doing, from thinking to trying, from organizing your life to actually living it. Maybe you don't need a longer list. Maybe you just need to pick one thing, one small, imperfect start, not for the sake of productivity, but for the sake of proving to yourself that you can follow through. Even if it's just one checkbox, even if your handwriting is a mess, even if you're scared, because momentum doesn't come from planning the perfect day. It comes from showing up, even when you don't feel ready, especially then. Opening too many tabs just to feel busy. It starts innocently enough. You open your laptop to do one thing, just one. Maybe answer an email. Maybe look something up. But then another thought pops into your head, and you open a new tab, then another, then another. Before long, your screen is a row of tiny rectangles, articles you'll read later, forms you'll fill out eventually, videos you meant to watch, shopping carts you never intended to check out. It looks like productivity. It feels like momentum. But you haven't actually done anything. You click between tabs like you're searching for something, but you're not quite sure what. A feeling of readiness, maybe, or clarity, or just the right energy to begin. You keep moving, jumping from one window to the next, convincing yourself you're gathering information, preparing, multitasking, but really, you're just circling, hovering around the work instead of landing on it. Each tab is a tiny promise, a reminder that you'll get to it, that you haven't forgotten, that you care. But with every new tab, your attention fragments a little more. Your focus slips. Your brain becomes a pinball machine, bouncing between thoughts, never settling long enough to go deep. And eventually, you feel scattered, drained, like you spent the whole day working without actually touching the thing that mattered. This habit is easy to justify because it looks like effort. Your screen is full, your brain is busy, but there's a difference between being occupied and being engaged, between looking active and actually progressing, and somewhere beneath the surface. You know that. That's why the tabs start to feel heavy. That's why closing them one by one feels like admitting something, like giving up on all the little versions of you who thought, "I'll come back to this." But maybe the problem isn't that you lost focus. Maybe it's that you were never allowed to just have one. We live in a culture that glorifies doing everything at once, that treats stillness like laziness and single tasking like a waste of time. So you compensate by keeping everything open, all the time, just in case. But your brain isn't built for a dozen simultaneous threads. It's built for presence, for attention, for depth, and depth requires commitment, not to everything, just to one thing at a time. So maybe today you close the tabs, not all of them, just the ones that no longer serve you, the ones that feel like pressure instead of purpose, the ones that were opened in a moment of avoidance, not intention. And maybe you leave one tab open, just one, and you give it your full, imperfect, undivided attention. Because doing one thing fully will always be more powerful than doing 10 things halfway, even if that one thing is simply breathing. Saving dozens of self-help materials without applying them. You've got folders, saved posts, highlighted PDFs, screenshots of quotes that hit just right, a whole digital archive of motivation, discipline, healing, growth. You follow all the right accounts. You've subscribed to newsletters, downloaded habit trackers, bookmarked TED Talks, bought journals you've only written in once. You know what shadow work is. You can quote James Clear and Brené Brown in the same breath. You're not uninformed. You're not unprepared. You're just stuck in a strange in-between, full of insight but starving for action. At some point, learning became the goal, not doing, not changing, just absorbing, just collecting more wisdom, more affirmations, more strategies for a better life you haven't actually started living. Because it feels good to learn. It feels like progress. You watch a 10-minute video on emotional resilience and feel like you've upgraded. You read 3 steps to overcome fear and tell yourself you're working on it. But the truth is, nothing shifts until something moves. The hard part isn't knowing what to do. It's doing it. It's facing the discomfort of application. It's failing at your first attempt and coming back anyway. It's admitting that all the theory in the world won't make you braver unless you get out of your own head. But hoarding self-help isn't just avoidance. It's protection. As long as you're still reading, still researching, still preparing, you don't have to face the risk of real change. You don't have to confront the fear that maybe the advice won't work for you, that maybe you'll try and still fall short, that maybe you'll change and people won't notice, or worse, won't care. So you keep downloading, saving, consuming. And it's not that any of it is bad. Some of it is brilliant. Some of it might truly change your life. But not if it stays on your hard drive. Not if it just becomes another bullet point in a list of things I'll do when I have more time, more courage, more clarity. The truth is, you don't need one more framework. You need a moment of honesty. A single decision to do something with what you already know. even something tiny, one breath held longer, one boundary voiced out loud, one habit started, not just tracked, because growth doesn't happen in your bookmarks. It happens in motion, in friction, in the quiet, awkward, beautiful moments where you stop saving and start showing up. Cleaning your desk instead of starting important work. You tell yourself it'll help you focus, that you just need a clean space to get started. So you begin tidying, just the surface, just the coffee mug, just the stack of papers. But soon, you're wiping, organizing, realigning your pens by color, scrubbing a corner of your desk you haven't noticed in months. You're busy now, moving, in control. You haven't started your real task, but this feels like progress. This feels safe, because the real work, the one waiting in a folder, a blank document, a difficult conversation, carries risk. It asks things of you: mental effort, emotional exposure, the possibility that you might not get it right. Cleaning, on the other hand, is straightforward. It has clear rewards, instant improvement. You wipe a surface and it gleams. You stack papers and they obey. You control the outcome, and control feels good. So you lean into the ritual, maybe light a candle, put on lo-fi beats, create the illusion that you're preparing, that you're building momentum. But deep down, you know what's happening. You're stalling. You're doing the thing that lets you avoid the harder thing. And because it looks productive, no one questions it, not even you. This habit is especially tricky because it masquerades as responsibility. You're not binge watching. You're not wasting time. You're improving your environment. But if we're being honest, how many great ideas have died waiting for the perfect workspace? How many first drafts never got written because the desk wasn't quite clean enough yet? You don't need a spotless desk to make something meaningful. You need courage. And courage doesn't care about smudges or paper piles. It just asks you to show up. As you are, in the mess, even if it's uncomfortable. That doesn't mean the tidying is worthless. Sometimes cleaning really does help clear your mind, but it can't be your hiding place. Not every time. Not when the act of preparing becomes the excuse for never beginning. So, the next time you catch yourself rearranging instead of writing, wiping instead of reaching, pause. Ask yourself, what am I avoiding right now? And if the answer is the thing I actually care about, then maybe it's time to step over the mess and begin. Because no amount of perfect alignment will substitute for progress. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do isn't cleaning your desk. It's touching the keyboard before you feel ready. Labeling procrastination as self-care. You say it with a little smile, like a joke that's only half a joke. I needed a self-care day. You stayed in bed, binge-watched 3 seasons of a show you don't even like that much, ordered food you didn't really enjoy, avoided emails, skipped the project, ignored the pile of laundry staring at you from across the room, and somewhere along the way, the weight of everything you didn't do started to press against your chest. But you told yourself it was okay, because this was self-care. Right. The truth is, sometimes it is. Sometimes rest is the most radical thing you can offer yourself, but not always. Not when it becomes a disguise. Not when self-care is just a softer name for procrastination, for avoidance, for giving up on your goals and calling it grace. Because real self-care doesn't always feel good in the moment. It's not always bubble baths and takeout and another episode. Sometimes it's boring. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's dragging yourself into the shower when you'd rather disappear into your blanket. Sometimes it's replying to the email, setting the boundary, facing the to-do list you've convinced yourself you're too overwhelmed to touch. Procrastination whispers that you're too tired, that you need a break, that you deserve ease. And maybe you do. But procrastination doesn't know the difference between rest and numbness. It just wants relief. Fast, cheap, and preferably without effort. And when you start calling that relief self-care, it gets harder to notice when you've stopped actually caring for yourself at all. Because care isn't just comfort, it's commitment. It's doing the hard thing because your future self deserves it. It's not punishing yourself for being tired, but also not lying to yourself about why you're stuck. It's admitting when your softness is no longer healing, but hiding. You deserve real rest. You deserve joy. But you also deserve the kind of care that builds something. That moves you forward. That makes you proud to have shown up. And sometimes that means telling yourself the truth. That today wasn't self-care. It was fear in a silk robe. It was delay dressed in kindness. It was a lullaby that said, "Don't worry, do it tomorrow," when what you needed was someone to say, "Do it scared, do it gently, but do it." Self-care isn't a shield against effort. It's what makes effort sustainable. And when it's real, you'll feel it, not as a fleeting escape, but as quiet alignment, as a moment of peace that doesn't leave a residue of guilt behind. Planning things in great detail, but never doing them? You sit down with a goal in mind, not just any goal, a big one. You want to get your life together, start a project, build something real. So you open a notebook or a digital planner, maybe both. You pick a font, choose a color palette, draw boxes, make timelines. You write headers like weekly workflow and strategic objectives. You create a beautiful plan. You even feel proud of how it looks. And then you close the tab or notebook and go do something else entirely. There's a specific kind of thrill in over-planning. It feels like control, like safety, like doing the work without the risk of failing at it. When you're planning, everything is still possible. The version of you who executes perfectly still exists. The version of you who follows the schedule, hits the milestones, transforms completely. They're alive on the page. But planning is easy. Doing is vulnerable. Doing requires imperfection. And once you begin, the fantasy starts to crack. So instead, you keep refining the plan. You build new systems. You test productivity apps. You make aesthetic calendars that align with your emotional seasons. You convince yourself that you're just getting ready, but you've been getting ready for months. Over-planning is seductive because it feels like movement. You stay busy. Your brain gets the dopamine of organization, but nothing actually changes. Your goals remain untouched. Your ideas stay theoretical. You're stuck in a loop of preparation that never leads to execution. Sometimes it's fear. Fear that once you try, you'll realize you're not as good as you hoped, that the plan won't work, that you'll disappoint yourself. So you protect the dream by keeping it on paper, polished, untouched, safe. But plans don't change lives. Actions do, messy, awkward, sometimes inconsistent actions, the kind that make you question everything, the kind that require real effort, the kind that force you to show up even when the mood isn't perfect and the desk isn't clean and the planner isn't updated. There's nothing wrong with planning, but a plan without motion is just a well-decorated cage. It traps your ambition in endless preparation. It keeps your potential hypothetical. So, maybe today, You stop editing the system. You stop mapping the perfect day. You pick one thing, one messy, ordinary, real thing, and you start. Because you don't need a perfect plan. You need proof. Proof that you can follow through. Proof that you're capable of building something outside your head. Proof that progress isn't about color-coded boxes. It's about getting your hands a little dirty. Your future doesn't live in a planner. It lives in motion, in choice, in showing up before you feel ready. Spending the whole day trying to optimize yourself. You wake up already thinking about how to be better. You open your phone to a podcast on morning routines, then meditate, journal, cold shower, smoothie, supplements, maybe a 5K if you're feeling ambitious. You stack habits like a checklist for enlightenment. Your calendar is color-coded. Your to-do list has sub-lists. You've got a system for your systems. Everything is optimized, except you still feel like something's missing. There's a strange kind of burnout that comes from trying too hard to be your best self. You're constantly tweaking, upgrading, monitoring. You turn rest into recovery, hobbies into performance metrics, moments of peace into productivity hacks. You don't go for a walk. You track your steps. Listen to a self-help audiobook and wonder if it counts as mindfulness. You're not living your life. You're managing it like a project with KPIs. It starts with good intentions. You want to grow, improve, take care of your body and mind. But somewhere along the way, self-development became self-surveillance. You stopped asking, "What brings me joy?" and started asking, "What brings me results?" You tell yourself this is discipline, that this is the path to fulfillment. But the truth is, you're exhausted. You haven't had a real conversation with yourself in weeks. Not the version of you that's optimizing, the real one. The one who just wants to take a nap without feeling like they've failed. And what's worse is that the better you get at optimizing, the harder it is to stop. You forget how to just be, how to sit in silence, how to let a day pass without measuring it, how to have a lazy afternoon without punishing yourself later. You become a machine in pursuit of meaning, forgetting that meaning isn't manufactured, it's felt. You can't optimize your way into being whole. You can't schedule your way into peace. And if every part of your life becomes a task to complete, a system to refine, you'll miss the point entirely. Because life isn't a project. You are not a product. You don't need constant upgrades. You need care. You need mess. You need days that are slow and pointless and soft around the edges. You need laughter that doesn't go in the habit tracker, joy that doesn't improve anything, stillness that leads nowhere. So, take the pressure off. Let the smoothie be just a smoothie. Let the walk be just a walk. Let today be just a day. No better, no worse. No more optimized than it needs to be. You are already enough, even when you're not improving. Shopping to fill an emotional void. It usually starts small. You've had a rough day, or a quiet day, or just one of those days where something feels off, but you can't name it. You open your phone, scroll a little, then you see it. Something pretty, something cozy, something clever. A new candle, a new hoodie, a productivity tool that promises clarity. You click. Add to cart. Maybe you even hesitate for a second, but not really, because for a moment, the idea of having that thing makes something inside you feel a little less empty. You tell yourself it's harmless, just a treat, a reward. You've earned it, and maybe you have. But this isn't about the thing. It's about the feeling. It's about the tiny rush of control when everything else feels uncertain. It's about the comfort of imagining a better version of yourself, calmer, more stylish, more put together, and thinking that maybe, just maybe, this purchase is the missing piece. Sometimes it is helpful. Sometimes a new journal really does kickstart a new habit. Sometimes new bed sheets really do make rest easier. But when it becomes a pattern, when your first response to discomfort is to open your wallet instead of your feelings, the habit stops soothing and starts numbing, because what you're really craving isn't the item. It's relief from boredom, from sadness, from stress, from the ache of wanting something more out of your life but not knowing what it is. And shopping is a quick fix, a controlled transaction in a world that often feels chaotic. But the package always takes a few days to arrive. And by the time it does, the feeling is faded. Sometimes you don't even remember ordering it. You start to realize your space is filling up with things you thought would make you feel something. A drawer of unused skincare, a shelf of untouched books, a closet of tags still on. And yet, somehow, you still don't feel full. This doesn't make you shallow. It makes you human. We all look for comfort where it's easy to reach. But at some point, you have to ask what the purchases are covering, what emotions you've been wrapping in bubble wrap and shipping to your own door. You deserve joy. You deserve beauty. You even deserve luxury when you can afford it. But you also deserve to feel what you're feeling without needing a tracking number to justify it. So next time the urge hits, pause. Ask yourself, what am I really reaching for? If the answer isn't the product itself, maybe you already know that no package can deliver what you're missing. Sometimes, the most radical thing you can do is sit with the emptiness. Not to suffer, but to understand it, to give it a name, because once you do, it becomes easier to fill the void with something real. Always playing music or podcasts to avoid silence, there's always something playing. Music while you shower, a podcast while you cook, a YouTube video in the background while you fold laundry. It's not even about entertainment anymore. It's about avoiding that one thing you know is waiting for you in the silence, your own thoughts. You tell yourself it's just how you focus, that you like the company, that it makes the task more enjoyable. And sometimes that's true. But sometimes, if you're honest, you don't remember the last time you did anything in complete quiet. You don't remember what your mind sounds like without someone else's voice filling the space. Silence used to be normal. Now it feels suspicious, uncomfortable, like a room with too much echo. When there's no noise, the questions get louder, the ones you've pushed down all day, the worries about your future, the regret about yesterday, the creeping loneliness you pretend isn't there. So instead, you reach for your headphones. It's not wrong to want distraction. Life is overwhelming. Your brain is tired, and there's so much content designed to keep you company. So you press play again, 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 until noise becomes the default, and silence becomes something you flinch away from. But silence isn't the enemy. It's a mirror. And like most mirrors, it doesn't lie. It shows you what you've been carrying. It shows you what needs your attention. It shows you what you've been too busy or too scared to feel. When you avoid silence, you're not just avoiding discomfort. You're avoiding clarity, insight, the soft voice inside you that only speaks when everything else quiets down. The one that says, "This isn't working," or "I miss them," or "I think I'm really tired." That voice doesn't shout. It waits. And when you drown it in playlists and podcasts and white noise, you lose touch with yourself. You move through life like someone trying to avoid eye contact with their own soul. But here's the thing. Silence can hold you. It doesn't have to be empty. It can be soft, spacious, a place to return to. Not because you've run out of things to play, but because you want to hear something real. So, maybe tomorrow, you walk without earbuds. You drive with the radio off. You fold clothes to the rhythm of your own breath. Not all the time. Just once in a while. Just long enough to remember that your thoughts, unfiltered, unedited, unscored, are still worth listening to. Because you don't need constant noise to feel okay. Sometimes, the silence is where the truth finally speaks. Smiling when you're hurting. You smile because it's easier, because it keeps things light, because if you let your face reflect how you actually feel, someone might ask, and you're not sure what you'd say. So, you smile at work, in group chats, during video calls, even when your chest feels heavy and your stomach's in knots, especially then. You've trained yourself to be okay, or at least to look okay. Maybe it started when you were younger, when you learned that people responded better to politeness than to pain, when you realized that being cheerful made you easier to be around. So, you became that version of yourself, the one who can crack a joke in the middle of a crisis, the one who holds it together until the door closes, and the world rewards you for it. People say you're strong, easygoing, positive. They praise your resilience without seeing the cost, because they don't know that the smile sometimes takes effort, that it sometimes feels like holding your breath, that it's not a sign of healing. It's a mask you've learned to wear so well. Even you forget it's there. You might even convince yourself that it's noble, that protecting others from your feelings is generous, that sparing them the awkwardness of your sadness is the kind thing to do. But what if it's not kindness? It's fear, fear of burdening, fear of vulnerability, fear that if you let the smile slip, people might step back instead of closer. So, you keep the performance going. You say, I'm good when someone asks. You laugh at things that don't feel funny. You push the truth down deep, promising yourself you'll deal with it later, alone. And maybe you will, but maybe you won't, because the longer you pretend, the harder it gets to admit you're not okay. The mask becomes part of you. But here's the thing. Real connection doesn't come from pretending. It comes from honesty, from letting someone see the crack in your voice, from saying, actually, today's been hard, from letting the smile soften and the truth come through. You don't have to tell everyone everything. You don't owe the world your rawest emotions, but you do owe yourself permission to feel without performing. To let sadness show up on your face without shame, to trust that the people who matter will lean in, not walk away. Because you're not loved for your smile, you're loved for your truth. And it's okay if some days that truth doesn't wear a grin. Sometimes strength looks like crying in someone's arms instead of alone. Sometimes healing begins when the performance ends. Making fun of yourself in front of others. You've got jokes, quick ones, smart ones. You know how to spin your flaws into punchlines before anyone else can. You call yourself awkward, a mess, chronically late, emotionally unavailable, but with a laugh, with charm, with timing that makes people grin. You roast yourself so smoothly that no one has to. And that's kind of the point. You've made self-deprecation your armor. If you say it first, it won't sting when someone else does. If you highlight your weaknesses, maybe they'll feel smaller. Maybe they won't be used against you. maybe people will find them endearing instead of disappointing. And for a while, it works. People laugh. You seem humble, relatable, harmless. But over time, something shifts. The jokes stick. You start hearing your own voice echo in your head, saying things you only meant as comedy. You start believing the punchlines, that you're too much, that you're not enough, that you're a walking flaw machine, just waiting for someone to call you out. Except now, you've already done it yourself. And here's the quiet tragedy. The more you laugh at yourself, the harder it becomes for others to take you seriously. When you dismiss your own worth, people follow your lead. They mirror the way you treat yourself. You become the friend who's always fine, the coworker who can take a joke, the person who's never quite allowed to be fully respected or fully seen. You tell yourself it's fine, that it's just humor, that it's how you cope. And maybe it is. But maybe it's also how you hide, how you stay one step ahead of vulnerability, how you keep your guard up while pretending you're wide open. There's nothing wrong with laughing at yourself, but there's a difference between self-awareness and self-erasure, between lightness and self-abandonment. You deserve to be more than a walking disclaimer, more than a list of quirks framed as warnings, more than the first to flinch at your own softness. So, maybe you pause the next time you're about to make yourself the joke. Ask yourself, am I laughing with love or with fear? Am I making space or trying to shrink? Because you're not safer for tearing yourself down first. You're not more lovable for making yourself smaller. You don't have to disarm everyone to be accepted. You're allowed to be whole, unapologetic, a little awkward, a little messy, and still deeply worthy of being taken seriously. Let the world meet you with your dignity intact, even if it feels risky, even if the silence after a joke not told feels unbearably loud. That silence might just be the space where something real can finally land. Staying connected to people who hurt you. You tell yourself it's complicated, that the history matters, that they've changed, or maybe they haven't, but you understand them now. You know where the sharp edges are and how to walk around them. You know how to make conversations light, how to steer things away from topics that hurt. You've learned the choreography. The relationship has a rhythm, and even when it stings, at least it's predictable. You stay connected to people who've hurt you not because you love pain, but because pain has become familiar. It's the price of entry you've grown used to paying. Maybe they've said sorry, maybe they haven't. Maybe you've convinced yourself it wasn't that bad. You tell others it's fine, that you've moved on, that people are complicated, and forgiveness is mature. But deep down, some part of you is still wincing. And the worst part, they might not even notice. They might think things are fine because you act like they are, because you still show up, still answer texts, still laugh at their jokes. You keep the connection alive with tiny acts of self-betrayal. One compromise at a time, one silence at a time. You shrink a little so they don't have to see what they did. But why? Why stay? Maybe it's because leaving feels like losing, like giving up on something that once meant something. Maybe it's because you're scared of the emptiness that would follow, of the space they'd leave behind, of the silence. So, instead, you fill that silence with a familiar ache, because it's less terrifying than being alone. Or maybe it's because part of you still hopes they'll change, that one day they'll see what they did and offer the apology you never got, that the story will turn around, that your loyalty will earn you peace. But here's the truth. Familiar pain is still pain. And just because you've adapted to it doesn't mean you deserve it. Just because you can survive it doesn't mean you should keep choosing it. You don't owe anyone continued access to you just because they've known you the longest. You don't have to keep proving you're strong enough to stay. Sometimes, healing looks like closing the door gently, not slamming it, like letting the thread go quiet, like refusing to keep offering your presence to someone who's never earned your softness, like giving yourself permission to grieve what could have been and still walk away. You are allowed to outgrow the people who hurt you. You are allowed to choose peace over familiarity. You are allowed to stop dancing around someone else's sharpness just to keep the rhythm going. Because you deserve more than a relationship built on endurance. You deserve ease, safety, consistency, and sometimes that starts with a quiet goodbye. Saying, "It's nothing," because you don't want to let others down. You say, "It's nothing," with a smile, because it seems easier, because you don't want to make it a thing. Because if you say what's actually on your mind, it might change the way they see you. So, you brush it off. You shrink your needs to keep the peace. You package your discomfort into something digestible. Or, better yet, invisible. You're the one who doesn't cause trouble. The easy friend, the reliable sibling, the dependable coworker. You make space for everyone else's feelings and quietly edit yours out. Not because you don't have them, but because you've learned to prioritize harmony over honesty, to smooth the edges of your truth until they're too soft to cut through anything. And maybe it started from something small, a time when you spoke up and someone rolled their eyes, or when your sadness was met with impatience, or when you asked for help and were told to toughen up. So now you keep it all tucked away. You say, "It's fine, it's not a big deal, don't worry about it," and every time you do, a little part of you wonders if you're even allowed to take up space. You become fluent in the language of dismissal. You master the art of pretending not to care. And people believe you. They assume you're always okay. Always strong. Always the one who doesn't need anything. They don't realize how much energy it takes to keep pretending, how much weight you carry in the name of not being a burden. But here's the catch. When you never speak your truth, the people around you don't get the chance to show up for you. You deprive them of the opportunity to care, to connect, to see the full picture of who you are. And over time, that silence starts to feel like loneliness, like invisibility. You deserve more than that. You deserve to be heard, even when what you say might be inconvenient. You deserve to feel safe enough to say, actually, it is something to let people see your rough edges without fearing they'll run. Not everyone will hold space for you, and that's okay. But the ones who matter will lean in. They'll want to know what's behind the smile. They'll be glad you told them. So, maybe next time, you pause before the automatic, "It's nothing." Maybe you ask yourself, what if it is something? What if naming it doesn't make you weaker, but freer? Because honesty isn't a disruption, it's a doorway. And your truth deserves room to breathe. Never saying, "I'm sad." You never say, "I'm sad." Not because you're never sad, but because the words feel too big in your mouth, too dramatic, too vulnerable. So, you find other ways to say it without actually saying it. You cancel plans. You go quiet in group chats. You scroll endlessly, numb and distant. You stare at the ceiling a little longer than usual, wondering if this is just tiredness or something deeper. When someone asks how you're doing, you say, "I'm okay." You smile, shrug, redirect. You've learned that sadness makes people uncomfortable, that it gets awkward, that it weighs down conversations and shifts the mood. So you lighten it, you joke, you deflect. You convince yourself that sadness is something you're supposed to keep private, folded neatly behind the scenes, out of sight. Part of it is pride. You don't want to seem like you're falling apart. You don't want to be the person who always needs saving. You think strength means silence. That composure means control. So you tighten the lid, you keep moving, you take care of things, you smile through it, even when it feels like a lie. And maybe you're afraid that if you do say it, if you admit to being sad, it'll open the floodgates, that you won't be able to stop crying, that no one will know what to do with your feelings, that you'll be met with pity, or worse, indifference. So, you hold it in, you carry it alone. But sadness doesn't go away just because you don't name it. It seeps into your bones. It shows up in the tension in your shoulders, in the heaviness in your chest, in the way joy feels muted even in good moments. It's still there, quietly shaping how you move through the world. You deserve to say it out loud, without shame. You deserve to speak your sadness like it's valid, because it is. You don't have to earn the right to feel low. You don't need a dramatic reason. Being human is reason enough. And when you do say it, when you finally say, "I'm sad," you might be surprised by what happens. Someone might listen. Someone might nod and say, "Me too." Someone might sit with you in the quiet without needing to fix it. And that kind of presence, that's what softens the sharpness of it all. So maybe strength isn't pretending you're fine. Maybe strength is saying, "I'm not okay right now," and letting that be true, letting that be enough. You're not weak for feeling deeply. You're not dramatic for naming your ache. You're just honest. And that honesty deserves a place in the room. Sleeping too little and calling it hard work. You brag about it like a badge of honor. 4 hours of sleep, a triple shot of espresso, and a to-do list that could kill a small army. You wear your exhaustion like it means something, like it proves your ambition, your drive, your worth. You scroll through productivity memes and repost hustle quotes, nodding along like they were written just for you. Sleep is for the weak, they say. And you believe it. Or at least, you've trained yourself to act like you do. You treat rest like it's a luxury you can't afford. Like slowing down is dangerous. Like you'll lose momentum if you pause. So, you keep going. You reply to emails at midnight. You squeeze in one more task. You push through the yawns and headaches and brain fog, telling yourself it's just part of the grind, that this is what success looks like. And sure, people admire you. They call you dedicated, passionate. They wonder how you do it all, but they don't see the toll, the way your hands shake when the caffeine wears off, the irritability, the forgetfulness, the creeping anxiety that comes with never giving your brain a full reset. They don't see you lying in bed, unable to fall asleep even when you finally try, because your nervous system doesn't know how to switch off anymore. You've confused burnout with productivity. You've mistaken self-neglect for commitment. And the scariest part, it feels normal now. Like rest is something you have to earn. Like it's only okay to sleep when everything else is done, which, let's be honest, it never is. But what if sleep isn't a weakness? What if it's the foundation? What if the version of you who's well rested is actually the most creative, most focused, most grounded version of all, you weren't built to run on empty. You weren't meant to prove your value through exhaustion. You deserve rest not because you've earned it, but because you're human, because your body is not a machine, because your worth isn't measured in hours worked or nights sacrificed. So, maybe tonight, you close the laptop a little earlier. Maybe you let yourself lie down without guilt. Maybe you stop glorifying the grind and start honoring your limits. Because sleeping isn't quitting, it's coming back to yourself. Skipping meals. You tell yourself you're just too busy, that you forgot, that you'll eat later. But deep down, you know it's more than that. Skipping meals has become something else, something quieter, more personal, a silent punishment, a way to regain control when everything feels chaotic. You don't throw your plate across the room. You just never fill it in the first place. Sometimes it's about guilt. Maybe you didn't get enough done today. Maybe you were too emotional, too distracted, too human. So you deny yourself something as basic as food, like it'll even the score, like it's what you deserve. You don't say it out loud. You don't even fully admit it to yourself, but your body knows. Your stomach grumbles, your hands shake, your mind fogs, and still, you keep going. Because eating would mean allowing yourself care, and some part of you thinks you haven't earned it yet. Other times, it's about disappearing, about shrinking, about trying to take up less space, literally and figuratively. If you're smaller, maybe you'll be easier to like. Maybe you won't bother anyone. Maybe you'll finally feel in control of something, anything. And the world doesn't help. It praises discipline, idolizes hustle, romanticizes skipping breakfast as ambition, and ignoring hunger as strength. But there's nothing powerful about starving your needs. There's nothing admirable about disconnecting from your body. You're not more worthy when you're running on empty. Food isn't a reward. It's not something you have to earn with productivity or perfection. It's fuel. It's care. It's a daily reminder that you deserve nourishment, not just for what you do, but for who you are. You are allowed to eat on your worst days, when you're sad, when you feel like a mess, when nothing feels accomplished. You are allowed to take up space, to be soft, to be fed. So maybe next time you think about skipping a meal, you ask yourself why. Ask yourself what story you're telling in that moment. Then remind yourself, you don't have to prove your worth through hunger. You're already worthy, even when you're still figuring things out, even when the to-do list is unfinished. Even when you feel like you've fallen short, eat, not because you earned it, but because you're here, and that's enough. Reading old messages to feel cared for again. It starts as a little scroll, just a quick peek, a name you haven't said out loud in months, maybe years, a thread of messages buried deep in your inbox. You tell yourself you're just curious, just checking something, but really, you're looking for a feeling, a flicker of warmth, of being seen, of being wanted. You read old texts like they're relics from a time when someone cared in a way that felt certain. There's comfort in those words, even if they're outdated, even if the person who wrote them no longer shows up. There's a version of you captured there, someone who was missed, who was complimented, who mattered. And for a moment, it's enough. It fills a gap. It patches something. But it's a tricky habit, because the more you reread those messages, the easier it is to blur the lines between memory and reality, between how things felt and how things actually were. You start to romanticize the past. You forget the silence that followed. You forget why the messages stopped. All you see is the highlight reel, edited by your own loneliness. Sometimes it's not even about the person. It's about the feeling, the safety, the affirmation. You're not longing for them. You're longing for the version of you that existed when those words felt true. The one who believed in that kind of connection. The one who didn't have to wonder if they were lovable. And that's okay. It's okay to miss being cared for. It's okay to want to feel chosen. But the danger comes when you linger too long. When you mistake nostalgia for a reason to reach out. When you reopen wounds disguised as sentimentality. When you keep returning to a digital ghost just to feel something real. You deserve more than recycled comfort. You deserve new words, spoken in the present tense. You deserve connection that doesn't live in the past. So maybe you let those messages be what they are. Proof that you were cared for once. Not proof that no one else ever will. Let them stay where they belong. In the archive. Not in your heart. Because you are still lovable. Still worthy. And you don't need to reread old messages to remember that. Rejecting compliments. You hear the compliment, and your first instinct is to dodge. Someone says, "You look good today," and you laugh it off. Must be the lighting. They say you did a great job, and you shrug. It was nothing. You can't just take it. You twist it, downplay it, hand it back like it doesn't belong to you, because somewhere along the way, you started believing that praise is suspicious, that admiration is undeserved, that if people really knew you, they'd take it back. It's not that you want to be rude. You're not trying to dismiss the person offering kindness, but you've built a reflex out of rejecting softness, like letting it in would make you too visible, too vulnerable. You learned to be humble, but somewhere along the way, humility turned into self-erasure. You stopped allowing yourself to be recognized. Maybe it's because you've tied your worth to perfection. You only accept good things when you've hit some invisible benchmark, one that keeps moving further every time you get close. Or maybe you grew up in an environment where compliments came with conditions, or were followed by criticism, or felt like setups. So now, even genuine kindness feels like a trap. But the truth is, a compliment is a gift, and rejecting it doesn't make you modest. It makes you starved. Starved for permission to feel good about yourself. Starved for moments of affirmation that you keep pushing away. When you reject a compliment, you're not just refusing someone else's kindness. You're reinforcing your own belief that you're not enough. You're telling yourself, over and over, that praise is dangerous. That love must be earned. That confidence is arrogance. But it's not. Confidence is just trust. Trust in your goodness, your effort, your presence. So, maybe next time, you try something new, you take a breath, you smile, you say, "Thank you." Even if it feels awkward, even if a part of you wants to cringe, let the words land. Let them sit in your chest. Let them remind you that it's okay to be seen in a beautiful light. Because here's the truth. You don't have to be flawless to be praised. You don't have to achieve some grand milestone to be appreciated. You are allowed to take up space in someone else's admiration. Compliments are not traps. They are mirrors. And you don't always have to look away. You deserve to see what others see when they look at you. With kindness, with respect, with quiet awe. So, say thank you. Not because you owe anyone anything, but because you're finally starting to believe it might be true. Staying busy to avoid being alone with yourself. You've mastered the art of staying occupied. There's always something to do. somewhere to be, someone to text back. You fill your calendar like a defense mechanism. Meetings, errands, chores, side projects, productivity hacks. Even your breaks are structured. Even your downtime has a goal. It looks impressive on the outside, like you've got your life together. But if you really pause, just for a moment, the truth bubbles up. You're terrified of stillness. Stillness means facing what's underneath. The questions that don't have easy answers. The feelings you've been outrunning. The parts of yourself you don't know how to sit with. So, instead, you stay in motion. Constantly. Because as long as you're busy, you don't have to deal with the echo of your own thoughts. You don't have to ask yourself why you feel empty even when everything looks full, and society cheers you on. It applauds your hustle, your discipline, your go-getter energy. But it doesn't see the cost. The anxiety simmering just below your perfectly color-coded planner. The exhaustion masked by caffeine and enthusiasm. The quiet sense that if you stop, everything might unravel, including you. You've started to believe that being busy means being valuable, that your worth is measured in tasks completed, goals chased, hours sacrificed. But deep down, you know it's not sustainable. You're not a machine. You're a person. One who deserves rest without guilt, silence without panic, presence without performance. So, what if you stopped for a second? Not because you finished everything, but because you don't have to earn your peace. What if you let the silence come? Let the thoughts arrive. Let yourself be known beyond what you do. Stillness is not the enemy. It's where the truth lives. It's where clarity waits. It's where your real self, the one beyond the noise, has been patiently hoping you'd slow down long enough to listen. You're not lazy for pausing. You're not broken if you struggle with stillness. You're just human. And being with yourself shouldn't feel like a threat. Let go of the fear that you'll fall apart in the quiet. Maybe the quiet is exactly where healing begins. Rushing deadlines just to feel something. You say you work best under pressure, that you need the thrill of the last minute to really focus. So you wait. You put it off. You convince yourself that the spark only comes when the clock is ticking loud enough to drown everything else out. And maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe you really do perform miracles at 2 a.m., adrenaline surging through your fingertips. But deep down, you know it's more than just a productivity quirk. It's a habit built on chaos, not confidence, because there's a strange kind of high that comes from pushing things to the edge, from dancing on the cliff of disaster and somehow pulling it off. It feels alive, urgent, intense, and for a moment, it makes you feel like you matter, like there's something worth showing up for, like your pulse has a purpose. But it's also a trap, because the more you rely on panic to perform, the less you trust yourself to show up calmly. You start needing the stress, craving the crash. You turn every task into a crisis just to feel something again. You confuse urgency with meaning, and in the process, you burn yourself out. Rushing deadlines becomes your way of manufacturing importance, of proving, if only to yourself, that you're capable, that you can rise when it counts. But what about the quiet days? The ones without fireworks or ticking clocks? Do you still believe in your own value when there's no rush to chase? It's okay to admit that procrastination sometimes feels like self-sabotage disguised as thrill-seeking. That may be. Underneath it all, you're scared of what your best looks like without the excuse of time pressure, that if you gave yourself space, you'd have to face what you're really capable of, And that can be terrifying. But here's the truth. Your creativity doesn't need chaos to exist. Your worth isn't tied to how close you can cut it. You're allowed to finish early, to work in peace, to succeed without the emotional whiplash. So, maybe next time, instead of flirting with failure just to feel something, you try something softer. You give yourself time. You start before it hurts. You prove that you can show up without panic. Because adrenaline fades, deadlines pass, but the way you treat yourself in the process, that stays. Make sure it's something worth holding on to. Waiting for validation instead of giving it to yourself. You post the photo, and then you wait. You finish the project, and then you ask around. Was it okay? You say something honest in a conversation, and then spend the next hour wondering if it was too much. Somewhere along the line, you stopped being your own source of reassurance. Now, your confidence comes with a comment section. Your worth refreshes with every like, every reply, every approving glance. It's not that you're vain. It's not even that you're insecure in the loud, obvious ways. You just learned that validation from others feels more real than anything you could offer yourself. Maybe it started in childhood, maybe in school, maybe in love. This idea that something only counts if someone else sees it, that you don't know how to trust something until it's echoed back to you, and so you wait for permission to feel proud, for someone else to say, you did well so you can believe it too, for a nod, a smile, a reaction, something to prove you're not invisible. But here's the quiet danger. The more you rely on external validation, the less you hear your own voice, the less you know what you think, what you feel, what you value. You become an echo of what others approve of. This habit, this craving, can be subtle. It hides in the way you check your phone after sharing something vulnerable, in the way you hold back your joy until someone else confirms it's justified, in the way you replay moments not to savor them, but to audit them. But you don't need a standing ovation to matter. You don't need applause to validate your growth. You don't need the green light from others to start believing in yourself. What if, instead of waiting, you practice giving that to yourself? What if you said, "I'm proud," before anyone else did? What if your worth was something you carried, not something you chased? It's not easy, especially if you've been wired to seek it elsewhere. But it's possible, slowly, gently, one self-acknowledgement at a time. You are your own witness, your own approval, your own applause. And that counts, that matters, that stays. Let yourself be enough. Even when no one's clapping, holding yourself together every day. You've become so good at holding it together that people think you never fall apart. You wake up, pull yourself into shape, and step into the day like nothing's wrong. You answer messages. You smile on cue. You meet deadlines. You say, "I'm okay," so often that it starts to sound like the truth. And in some ways, it is. You are okay, but only because you've built an entire identity around keeping it all in. You've trained yourself to swallow the cracks, to tape yourself together before anyone sees, to keep the soft parts hidden under layers of composure. You tell yourself it's strength. You call it resilience. But sometimes, it feels like performance, like you've forgotten how to be without the mask. And the thing about always holding it together, eventually, you forget how to fall apart. You forget how to cry without apologizing, how to ask for help without rehearsing the request 10 times, how to feel something without analyzing it to death. You become so used to keeping yourself upright that the idea of unraveling, of being messy, emotional, human, feels foreign, unsafe, wrong. People admire your strength, but they don't see the cost. They don't see the late nights where you stare at the ceiling, holding back tears because no one expects you to break. They don't see how tired you are of being the strong one, of being the stable one, of being the one who always has their shit together. But here's the thing, falling apart isn't failure. Letting go isn't weakness. There's a difference between emotional control and emotional repression. And at some point, control stops being a choice. It becomes a prison. You don't have to wait until you're at your breaking point. You don't need a catastrophe to justify your feelings. You're allowed to crumble a little, to not have it all together, to be human out loud. So maybe, today, you let one tear fall without wiping it away. You say, I'm not okay without cushioning it. You soften a bit, even if no one notices. Because softness is not the opposite of strength. It's part of it. You've carried so much for so long. You've been composed, consistent, unshakable, but you're not a statue. You're not stone. You're allowed to feel, even if it's inconvenient, even if it scares you, especially if it scares you. Let the armor loosen. Let the cracks show. They're not flaws. They're windows. You don't need to be held together to be worthy of love. You just need to be real. Sometimes it's not the big decisions. It's the little things you repeat, on autopilot, in silence, that slowly pull you apart. If this felt a little too real, you're not alone. Like, subscribe and stay soft. We're all unlearning, together.